So we have finally made it. We are at the end. This is the last session, session 5. And this is just all about resources and wrap up. No major information, but just good things to know. So let's continue. So let's get started with some resources. Our first one is called runrepeat.com. Run Repeat is basically a shoe review website by a group of people that review a bunch of different shoes. And they're really good. They have a lot of different metrics. I believe I showed you before on where I find the information on a website. Run Repeat was one of those websites that had all that information. They have their own types of tests. Now, of course, not every test is perfect, but it does help you break down a shoe into what you need and what you want. For example, maybe you didn't think about how the midsole changes when it gets cold. Like it could turn, the foam, the midsole could turn, frigid, very hard, so it changes how you run on it. They do those types of tests. Then we have my favorite, which is YouTube, after Run Repeat. If you don't want to sit there and read it on your own, you can go on YouTube and watch different types of runners review shoes. There's a lot of people out there who really love running and who really love running shoes. These are a couple of the ones I have watched and are my favorites. Kofuzi, Run Like Heller, Joanna, Ed Bud, and Believe in the Run. They all have different styles on how they review shoes, what types of shoes they usually review, and so on. So it's all about personal preference, but they're really good for getting a starting base on, like watching someone who runs a lot review shoes. Then we have Reddit, Running Shoe Geeks. This is a subreddit all about running shoes. They are geeked out on these running shoes. They review running shoes. They talk about different running shoe releases. You have different runners. They might not be pros. They could be beginners, intermediate, and advanced. Usually it's intermediate slash advanced runners on here, but they talk about, their foot strike, how much they weigh, their usual running times and stuff like that, how many miles they usually run, and then they give you a review on the shoe like, oh, it had a lot of energy return, or I didn't really like the drop on the shoe. So those are really good if you want to read through and scroll through a forum one day to, you know, figure out what type of shoe you're interested in, or just, you're curious. And then our last one is running stores. I often don't go to running stores, but it's a real good place to start because there are people who know about how to recommend you the right shoe. Now, of course, when you're at the running shoe store, you don't have to take what they say into heart. Like, you don't have to buy that specific shoe they recommend. If it doesn't fit for you, you don't have to. But they're a good place to start for absolutely new runners. And, if you're a little like anxious to do it on your own and you believe you need help, it's a good place to start. So I know we've seen this slide before from session 1, but we're going to get into our wrap up. And our first question we asked, remember, it was why should I care? And there was two reasons: injury prevention and performance. Injury prevention because of all the impact and the shock on our body from running, and we can get injured if we don't have the right shoes, particularly if we keep doing it. And then of course performance based on the foam composition, the features of the shoe, the aspects, it can potentially increase your performance. So remember that. That's why we kind of are interested in picking out different running shoes and the proper running shoes. And then, of course, we can't forget this is one of our key factors. One of the three key factors on how to help you pick a running shoe is knowing your running stats, which was weight, how much you weigh, heavier runners versus lighter runners, your running level, are you a beginner, are you intermediate, or are you advanced, foot strike, the way your foot lands when it first touches the ground, and pronation, which is the way your foot naturally rolls inward when you run or walk. But yeah, so is it out, a little in, or just, the natural motion? So yeah, remember, weight, level, foot strike, pronation are all under running stats. There could be more, there could be less, but we focus on these four for running stats. And then we have our last two key factors of the three key factors, which is distance and preferences. Distance is just basically how long the run is. Is it 1 mile? Is it 10? Is it 50? Is it 30? Is it 12? Remember, 1 to 3 is short distance. 4 to 9 is mid distance, and 10 or more is usually long distance. And of course, remember that this is kind of like a rough, like they can intermingle sometimes with the distances, but the less mileage you run, the less cushion you usually need, and the more mileage you run, the more cushioning you usually need. And then we have preferences. This is basically what the runner prefers in their shoes. So we focused really on soft versus firm, low versus high stack, no versus low versus high support. And we didn't talk about this one much, but this is drop preference, which we'll of course get into the wrap up of that in the next video. But remember, soft midsole, which is the cushioning, or a firm one. Low versus high stack is basically, how high it is, your cushioning, your midsole, and no versus low versus high support. If you overpronate, you're more likely to lean towards getting supported shoes, but maybe you don't really overpronate like that, and you still want a little bit of support. You want some low support. You're looking for that wide base on the wide sole on the shoe, So remember distance and preferences, which are our last two key factors. So running stats, distance, preferences. And then we have our shoe aspects. These are our shoe features. This is what components make up the shoe that help you pick out a running shoe. There's all of these like weight, drop, pronation, but we really focused on a couple, which is weight, which is how much the shoe weighs in general. And remember, depending on the shoe size, the weight changes, even from a male size 8 to a female size 8. So your shoe changes based on the shoe size. Then we have our drop. Remember, the drop is the heel to toe. So the heel stack height minus the forefoot stack height, which is also our next one, gets you your drop. So if it's 36 millimeters in the heel and 28 in the forefoot, you have an 8 millimeter drop. Then, of course, your midsole is this middle cushion part. It's usually all white for most running shoes, but they add a little color sometimes, but that's still your midsole. And of course, we talked about terrain and how the bottom of the shoe or the shoe generally may look different depending on the terrain and all of that. So it's basically focusing on, your shoe, what makes up the shoe, right? And remember, we had two ways to pick a running shoe. We had our simple method and our complex method. Our simple method was looking at the midsole, and just going with that based off of looks. And then we had our complex, which brings in all our key factors to helping pick a shoe. So remember, Chris, if we had all this information on him, we could pick a shoe better. This is our complex method. As you can see, two of these shoes work out for what information we had. Versus if we just had, I just want a running shoe that has balance cushion, all these shoes would have worked for him with the simple method, right? But here we see that, one of these shoes, if we look further, it doesn't really work for him. So that's the difference between the simple and complex method, is using the key factors that we learned, the three key factors that we learned, and picking a shoe that works best. In conclusion, we're at the very end. I'm so proud of you guys. So throughout this lesson, you learned how to not describe the benefits and importance of running shoes. We know why we want the appropriate running shoe and what it can do for us when we get that proper running shoes. You also learned how to utilize the three key factors to choose the proper running shoe. We know we have running stats, preferences, distances, right? And we don't have to have all of that information, but it, paints the whole picture. But even having one or two is useful and helpful. We also listed the different aspects of a running shoe, like drop, forefoot, and heel stack height, weight, all of the midsole, all of that. So that helps us also pick a shoe because maybe I want more um stack height, not less, or maybe I like a lower drop versus a higher drop, stuff like that. And then, of course, lastly, we learn how to choose running shoes through a simpler method, which actually this should say, and the complex method. So, through everything, we learn two methods on how to pick the proper running shoe. So, but this, of course, this program focuses mainly on the complex method. But we have learned a lot, and I'm proud of you guys for sticking with it. And I actually learned a lot myself too while doing this, even though I know how to pick a proper running shoe for myself. So good job on finishing the program. And of course, mission accomplished. We did it. You have finished the program on how to choose the proper running shoe. All right. So now you can go ahead and tell everybody you can pick a running shoe for yourself and everyone around you. So thank you for finishing this program. I really appreciate it. It took a lot of time and effort, and I'm hoping that at the end you guys have learned something. And don't forget to take the survey as it helps me figure out what to change and what to keep and how to improve this even more. So, thank you.